Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and this is episode 255, where we're going to be talking about how to get music you and your audience wants. All right, now finding a musician to compose your game music can be a task in itself, but understanding the process and communicating your vision can be more challenging than any dev would expect. That's why we have Dakota Suave with us today to share his insights to help us navigate the music composition process so you can have something you love and your audience wants. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today I have Dakota Suave with us today. Dakota, how's it going?
Hey, good, Andrew, and you?
Not too bad. I can't complain. I'm a little stuffy today, only because I did some swimming, and I think I got more water up my sinuses than I cared for. So here we are. But I'm doing good. And how about yourself? I understand it's an early morning for you right now.
Yeah, it's 7 a.m. I guess it's not that early, but, I've got work after this, but I actually wake up at like 5 a.m. usually. I tend to kind of start it nice and early, so had some time to prepare before this, so yeah, feeling good. It's still dark outside. It's winter down here.
That's right, it's winter. Yep, it's muggy and rainy over here in the northeast of the U.S., so... Cool. Well, hey, glad to have you on the show and everything, and... So I'd love for you to just take a moment and introduce yourself in terms of, what you do for work and what else you do in your personal time, too, when you're not so busy with audio and music stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So my name's Dakota Suave, as Andrew had said. People tend to say Sauve or Suave, which is totally fine. Like, I'll take it. It's definitely not true, whatever you say, but I'll own it. Anyway, I do have a day job. I work as a project manager for an ICT company, but that's boring. We won't talk about that this time. I'm a freelancer sound designer and composer for video games. And I've been doing that for about a year and a half specifically, but I've been doing audio production for about 3.5 years now. I dabbled in it when I was younger. I used to be in like hardcore bands and stuff like that, sort of like Mick Gordon-esque, Bring Me the Horizon type. But not so much anymore. Now you'll find me playing, video game tunes and doing remixes and stuff like that of those songs. And yeah, it's quite enjoyable. I have actually dabbled in game development myself. I've developed a 3D platformer. I don't have a title yet, but it's nearing completion. Excuse me. It's probably at the alpha stage. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned how to use Unreal Engine quite a lot. I've done some tutorials and stuff like that just to get up to speed on it. It's been quite fun. We have quite the local scene here in Adelaide, which is awesome. So in Australia, we're sort of like, I guess, like Kansas or Cleveland, where I'm from, where it's sort of like the underdog of the country. And we love to throw that in everyone's face that we actually bring in, I think, 20 to 25% of all video game development income and size. So yeah, we're actually quite a powerhouse in Australia for video game development.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And, one thing I would like to point out, too, is Dakota is actually the composer of the Season 2 theme as well. And quick story, because this one really stood out to me. He was on another podcast episode. What was it? It was Live Bullions, correct?
Yeah, that's right. A couple of friends of ours host that here in Adelaide.
Okay.
It's mostly there to just help game developers out as a whole, and they interview a lot of local talent. So that was quite fun.
It's a really good show. So if anybody wants to check it out, they definitely should. But what I want to say is the episode Dakota was on, and he introduced himself, and it just stood out to me, and it's not relating to this episode at all, topic-wise, but still an important thing in terms of what we discuss on the show in particular. So how I connected with Dakota was actually as you mentioned, he's a dev. He's listening to other podcasts and stuff, and he was listening to Indie Game Movement. And then he reached out and said, "Hey, look, I really like the show. I love what you're doing, but I noticed some things with like the audio quality, and I just figured because I'm a listener and I like what you're putting together here. I'd love to help you out with some of these things where I think I can help you improve the quality." So we connected. It was great, and then he just casually mentioned that, "Hey, by the way, I also like compose music and stuff. So if you're ever looking for something, or someone who's," and then sure enough, had a need, and I just wanted to point this out real quick, and then I'll be done. All that he did was he was just a big fan, listening to the show and wanted to help, and through that he got work and potentially got, I'm sure, a lot of things, and it's clearly a strategy he's using that's really effective. But he's leading with giving back, and I don't mean to put you like on a pedestal here, Dakota, but I think people, if they go in with the right intentions, can really make a lot more happen for themselves. And because of that, we're here today to have this awesome discussion about composition and freelancing, and why that and what that process is like to ultimately get people the music that they want for their audience. So sorry for that tangent, everybody. But it was just something that was that really stood out to me, and just something to always keep in your back of your mind when you're looking to connect with someone, or ultimately trying to get something in the long run. Lead with really standing out by helping other people out, or looking at ways like that. Okay, so Dakota, thank you for sharing that stuff about you. It really gives us an idea of the breadth of talent that you have, and everything else. But now I want to learn a little bit more personal stuff about you by going through the Q box round. So are you ready for that?
I am ready. Bring it on.
All right. What's at least one of your favorite musicians?
Yeah, so if we're talking composing, Grant Kirkhope is my all-time favorite. He's done Banjo-Kazooie and I believe the Rabbids Mario, and he's done quite a few films. But I am heavily influenced by Lena Raine and Mick Gordon. So very contrasting sounds there, but I like to mesh elements of all of them in my music. If we're talking just normal, like, just listening tunes, I would say Dallas Green from City and Color, and Alexis on Fire. So, yep.
Sweet. Sledding or tubing?
Tubing. I don't think I've actually been sledding. I've been skiing, but tubing's fun. You just sit on an inflatable raft and like shred down the hill. It's great.
That is awesome. Yep, I agree. Favorite childhood cartoon growing up?
Oh, Pokemon, hands down. I'm actually rewatching it. They just released like a Journey series, which is sort of like the Sword and Shield
okay.
version. It's not too bad. Like it's never going to be as good as the originals, but it's pretty good.
Nice. Final Fantasy or Zelda?
Oh no, you're going to get me canceled. I actually haven't played either of those, believe it or not. So I guess all credibility is just shattered right now.
No, it's okay.
I would say Zelda, because Koji Kondo is one of my favorite composers rather. And like Gerudo Valley and Fairy Fountain are two of my favorite songs. So they're like, just fantastic.
I would have to agree. Those are probably my two favorite as well. Like I could put Fairy Fountain on repeat. God knows how long. So, all right.
Do you like the Game Chops remix as well?
I'm sorry. Do I like the game what?
The Game Chops remix. I think Mikkel did it.
Yes. I'm a huge fan of Game Chops. It's one of the very few branded hoodies I own, in general, of anything branded. So, yes, that one is very good.
Brilliant.
All right, and what's this? I think I may have. I think I deleted one of your questions. Nope. All right, I'm losing my mind here. Okay, last but not least, what game are you playing right now?
To be honest, like I'm one of those people, like most game devs, who spend more time making them than playing them lately. But I am a casual gamer, mostly with friends doing like co-op first-person shooters. But I just booted up No Man's Sky recently, so that's really good.
Okay,
a lot of fun, nice and relaxing, I would say, compared to Deep Rock Galactic, which is the other game I rotate between, and Killing Floor 2.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, tried the new Pokemon Snap. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. It's almost like too chill for me and a little repetitive, but it's a good game. I feel like you kind of have to play it with somebody else in the room to enjoy it. And, it's more nostalgia than anything, I think. But anyway, just my opinion.
All right, cool. Well, hey, thank you for those answers, and there were some good ones in there, and it's okay. Like, I hope I didn't put you on the spot with between Final Fantasy or Zelda, but I think your answer was perfect.
No, it's fine. You can't. I'll even own up and say I haven't even watched Star Wars, so I might as well just come out of the closet again, but this time for game hatred. So good.
That's great, man. Well, it's important. I mean, there's no reason to hide from that. Like, everybody's different, and that's completely fine. Like, I'm sure there's things that I haven't done that people have probably questioned, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. All right, cool. So let's get into the topic now. Thank you for sharing that with us. And our topic today, as I mentioned earlier, is how to get music you and your audience wants. So to kick off this conversation, because I think this is like probably the biggest thing that is on people's minds is, in your opinion, what do you think is the largest challenge that devs have when they're trying to get music for their game?
I would say that a big challenge that most devs would face would be balancing budget and even deciding if they want to contract a composer for the game. It's very easy to go on the Unreal Engine marketplace or Unity marketplace and get asset packs, right? So just sort of pre-made music that's ready to go for you, which, there is merit in that. Like, music as a whole, especially electronic music production, is very sample based now. So you're basically reusing other things and making it your own. But I just feel that you can't replace integrated adaptive audio that is customized for your game. But, of course I'm biased. Obviously I wouldn't. It's just one of those things that it could suit your game post, of course. Like, it would have a good feel to it. But I just feel like the game feel is really reliant on audio. Of course, there's visual aspects and actual gameplay, which is huge, but audio sort of is the glue for the feeling that you get for the game. So I think spending a bit of budget on, getting a contractor is important for this element. And not to mention, the market is quite saturated with composers. There's almost like memes out there, like composers just sliding into DMs for people and saying like, hey, do you need a composer? After the last post they made was them actually featuring their composer. So it's pretty bad these days. But it's also great because we have a big community around that. So
yeah,
I would say budget is the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because I mean I'm sure that's like the first and foremost that people are thinking about is the budget, but also like other things, and you brought this up, and it's a great segue here, but just the fact that it's really saturated. And because it's easy to get a sense of what you're looking for in terms of style and everything. But outside of that, and let's say if people consider their budget, are like, okay, we definitely want a composer because of just, like you said, that customized, feel that they could get for to help bring the game together. But outside of sound and style, what are some other qualities that devs should consider or look for when they're hiring a musician?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I would say, yes, the market is saturated, and yes, there's a lot of talent out there. I'm definitely not, bashing how talented these people are. Like, it's incredible what a lot of musicians can do in the video game realm. It's just a different style of music. So I just want to iterate that. A few traits that would be very important when hiring a musician for game audio is technical knowledge. So it's basically become a necessary act that you know how to use middleware at the minimum. So middleware is basically the software that bridges bringing the audio into the game based on different parameters you can set. So if you say it's location based and you reach a certain location by a trigger volume or something like that, it would play either a certain part of a track, it would add or take away instruments, say, or it would go to a different track altogether, and it would sort of transition via crossfade or something. So at the very least, knowing how to use middleware like Fmod or Wise. But if they know how to integrate audio directly in the engine, that's good as well. But it depends on what they're after.
Okay.
The other thing is just making sure there's somebody that you get along with. It's like any hiring process, any contractor, anything like that. You need to make sure that you gel well with them, because you're going to be working closely with them. So yes, they need to have the talent and the sound that you're looking for, and ideally the technical knowledge. Otherwise, that'll be a big learning curve for them. But you just want to actually enjoy them as a person. Like we love those people we work with that are like our best workmates or something like that. It's the same concept.
Yeah, and you make an important point too there, that you're going to be working with them directly and communicating with them a lot. So how they communicate information and everything else, I think is probably more imperative than anything else, because as we'll get into this a little bit further, like communication with this medium can be a challenge in itself too. So knowing those things up front, like you said, getting to know them a little bit and seeing if you gel, and having that time also be made to set expectations is probably really important, in addition to the other important skill sets and that they need. So yeah, and I
Absolutely.
like. And I like how you your response is pretty simple for the most part. I mean, I'm sure we could go into tangents here about like all the certain qualities, but as far as I was concerned, I was like, wow, these sound perfect. If I ever had a need to really look out and put out some kind of essentially a job posting, I'd feel confident asking for these things and being well prepared to go on that hiring hunt. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. That's right. The other thing I wanted to say is because your audience is obviously game developers, they may not. Well, I mean, it's probably a varied audience, but I would say primarily game developers looking on how to market their game. The thing is, there's no need for them to know all the technical music stuff, right? Like leave that to us. So I didn't want to sort of go down that rabbit hole, because it sort of would be on deaf ears, I would say.
Yep.
But another big benefit you could look out for is if it's a small team, which I would say most independent games nowadays are either solo devs or small teams of maybe 2 to 8 people. Just depending how economically viable the game could be. They could benefit severely from somebody that can do a hybrid of tasks. So like a composer that also can do 3D asset building, like game art, environment art, that sort of thing. Or the classic hybrid that would probably suit it the best would be a sound designer and a composer. So somebody that can make sound effects, ambiances, that kind of thing. And any other game dev skills like programming, I would say would be quite helpful as well. Just knowing how to use a game engine really is important. So,
and I'm sorry, you mentioned about was it design and composer? Or those two elements, or just if you don't mind, could you elaborate a little bit more on what those different tasks are? Because I know that there's at least with that one you mentioned, it seems that there could be potential overlap with composer compared to audio engineering or anything along those lines.
Yeah, no problem. So a composer is basically somebody that makes the music for the game. A sound designer traditionally would be somebody that mostly does sound effects and sort of implements those into the game. However, I'm noticing that the landscape is shifting a bit, and a lot of AAA companies are hiring audio designers, and that sort of covers the whole thing. So that would sort of be where the hybrid is coming into play, where you not only make the music, but you have to implement it into the game. So either using middleware or the game engine itself, and you need to make the sound effects as well. So I think that is becoming the norm, because maybe the market is shifting, and because there is so many composers out there and sound designers, it's sort of like, all right, well, you got to have all the juice now.
Okay. No, thank you for explaining that, because I think it sounds like now, because of the shift and everything, it's important to kind of know those things too, and understand like where some people might be a little bit more, have been more focused in areas too. And that's okay if they are, but just understanding that better in terms of, where does it meet your needs, your project needs, and are like, yeah, you can hire a composer, but if there's someone else who's willing and able to help out in other areas, you could be getting a lot more value out of that particular individual based off of your needs. So I'm glad you detailed that out a little further.
No problem.
All right. So another thing I want to talk about too is, when devs are looking for a particular musician or composer, that has a particular style, let's say, like you can hear, samples on SoundCloud and everything, and they have a particular, really focus on a particular area, right? But could there be benefits in broadening the scope and looking at a more versatile composers or musicians?
Yeah, I would say versatility is important, especially if the direction of the game changes, or different levels would require different sorts of music to evoke different feelings. Different parts of the game too. Like if you're doing a boss fight, you almost always need that epic, excuse me, that epic feel. So I do personally see the benefit in a broader scope, specifically to kind of blur creative lines. So I think that nowadays you have to really have innovation in your music. So sound design within your music is very important, not just taking a bunch of presets and just slapping it on a MIDI track and making like just a basic melody. You really need to have a feel, right? Because when we think about music in video games and video games as a whole, the whole intention is to evoke a specific feeling to your players, whether it's just pure enjoyment, whether it's like Phasmophobia, where you're trying to just scare the bejesus out of them. Yeah, the main thing is, even if you do want to niche down and find a composer that has a very specific sound that you're after, like this is obviously why people hire, say, Lena Raine or Mick Gordon, because they have a very specific sound that suits certain games. I mean, obviously they're far talented than I personally feel I am just yet, but they're goals, so eventually we'll get there. And I think as long as you have a unified message with your music and the game as a whole, then it's fine. You can have different sounds for different levels, different, I guess, events within the game. I think that definitely, yeah, you're going to have to. You can't just have it always one note or, just super chill and ambient the whole game, unless you have a hyper casual game or just a relaxing sort of survival game or something like that. It's all about just keeping a unified sound, making sure that it's not jarring when you go to different areas. And so
yeah, no, it's and I think that's part of where the real art and really understanding and communicating your vision too, because having that range, but also having the range be unified is that I think that's where the challenge can lie, or whatever. So there's that level of consistency, even if there's some level of dynamic to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you want something that's going to change and progress as the game goes on, no matter what kind of game you're making. But you can change things like instruments. You can change themes, which are basically the overlying melody of the track, like a motif or leitmotif, as they call it. So, when we think of Banjo-Kazooie, I'm going to come back to that because I just, that hits the heartstrings. Grant Kirkhope relies very much on the melody to carry the song, right? So it's very playful, upbeat, but adventurous. You could change the instruments to be almost anything, right? Like he's using flutes, banjos, all these different things that you don't typically hear in music these days, or at least, video game music. Well, no. You hear it a lot in video game music, not so much like commercial pop or anything.
Right. Yep.
But it's the overlying theme and the feel that you get from his composing. So I think that's critical. So it doesn't really matter if they have a broad background or interest in music, or they cover a bunch of different genres. I think that's actually an asset more than a hindrance. But it's really just making sure that it suits what you're after, which is up to the communication between you and the composer.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, I want to try to shift things in a different direction here, and one we mentioned earlier, and which is essentially around understanding the process. Because let's face it, this process is quite a bit different. And I can speak from personal experience working with you, just simply because it's like, how do I get what's in my head to you in certain ways and things like that, right? So I was hoping that at a high level, can you break things down for what a typical process may be like for when devs start working with a musician?
Yeah, of course. So I'll leave all the like onboarding and contractual stuff out of it.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have a place right now, at least in this question. There's a person called Akash the Car. He's fantastic. He goes into a lot of detail on this, and he has a free course if any game developers are interested in that, and freelance sound designers. So I'd recommend that if you want information on that. But in terms of the process from start to finish, I'll keep it really high level. But you would want to, I guess, explain as closely you can the feeling you're trying to evoke. Again, I keep coming back to the feeling because that's really all that matters. You don't need to go into technical detail and say, I want a really bright mix. I want heavy distortion, but this kind, I want it to feel really rumbly, like really get those low frequencies nice and distorted. We don't necessarily need that. I mean, if you know that knowledge, that's fantastic and that will be helpful. But I think the biggest thing is to just give reference tracks or reference video games and say, play this for 20 minutes and, this is the feeling that I want to evoke, or at least very close to this. Or even explain different situations that make you feel a certain way. Like, if it's a very sad game, maybe explain the process of grieving over someone you love. Something like that. Not so much the technical detail. Like, don't get fixated on that. You don't need to go into those kind of details. I would say reference tracks are huge. So if you have either video game OSTs that you are a big fan of, or if there's just commercial music that there's like a bridge or a chorus or a hook that really has this feeling, or these certain sounds that you're looking for, this timbre, send that through. That's important. I think what happens is, we get fixated on the little details, whereas it's sort of bigger picture that you need to do. And then as you get further along with your revisions, so I send you through, say, draft 1 of level 1's theme, and you say, oh, no, I really love this, but, can we change this instrument to be something else? Yeah, of course. Do you have the instrument in mind? No, I just know I want it to be like plucky, like sort of like a, I guess, banjo or something like that, or a plucked guitar.
Yep.
Yeah, just any kind of stringed instrument that you pluck to play, like even a violin with staccato or anything like that. So I guess like the revision process, it can be ongoing. The games can usually take, 1 to, I guess, 5 years even, more than that. I've heard game developers say, just release it. I think if a game takes 5 years, I think you need to call it and just move on, in the best way. Like, obviously you don't want to release a bad game, but, is there any other detail you're looking for, Andrew? I guess the process is always going to change depending on the contractor and the developer. But I guess step 1 is always just get really clear on what you want the outcome to be. Step 2 is potentially give them a demo or anything like that. I think especially with the saturated market, you can definitely afford to have demos from multiple composers to make sure that you're getting the right fit. And revise, give clear feedback on what it is you're wanting. If it's a specific sound, or if it's just the melodies aren't quite right, try to know what it is. And I know that's difficult for some people that maybe aren't musically inclined, but just try to analyze what it is you do not like or you do really like, and give that feedback.
Yeah, no, I think that's, well, first, that's basically what I was looking for. And to that last point too, I remember when we were creating the theme, it like, and this is a thing too, I think might be an interesting point to keep in mind, when you're working with a professional or a composer, that I would, and this is how I kind of went in with Dakota here too, is like, hey, you know what you're doing. Give me what you think is good, and then we'll talk if we need to change things. And then when it came down to like that revision process, I did my best to provide just some maybe slight changes to the melody where I thought it might work better. But I still love that you brought that forward in terms of what you thought would be really appealing and stuff too, because I mean that's important, and I learned a lot from that too. But yeah, just being as clear as possible, and I'm just trying to think if there are people that aren't necessarily musically inclined, what are good ways? And I think it could be just as simple as I would like the notes to go higher between second, like 12 seconds and 15 seconds, opposed to going down, for example, is probably a good clear. I'm guessing. Would you say that would be helpful, and it could be a clear way of helping to really pinpoint and nail down what that what you're looking for if it gets down to that granular?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was helpful for when we were putting together your theme, wasn't it? Like you basically said, oh, I do really like the melody and everything, but those last few notes, right? I remember it being the last like 3 notes. It was just maybe 1 or 2 semitones. It was still in key and everything, but you just wanted a different resolve, which is completely fine. But I think, and I remember you sort of recording, you humming the note, and it was great. And I was like, Andrew, I don't mean to be rude, but it is slightly out of key. What if I, what if I show you my DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, and show you the actual thing? And we did a screen share, and I remember showing you the possible note options. And yeah, we basically slid them up and down and said, all right, this is what it's going to resolve to if we get to that point. What do you think? Oh, no, I think it's the one above. And I think we ended up going up to 2 semitones. And then that was it. Like, that was the only tweak that you needed, which there's going to be a lot of tweaks. There's always going to be, especially if it's a bigger game. And there's nothing wrong with that. Composers need to get on board with getting the feedback, because it's only going to help you grow as a professional as well. And it's only going to help the developer get the result that they want, which is going to benefit everybody. The audience, yourself, obviously the game developer. I think the biggest tip there would to just be get in the trenches with the composer and the game developer, and do screen shares, show them what you have, work in progresses, or whips, like we call them in the composer. Well, actually, I think that goes for anybody. Whips are just important. It doesn't mean that you don't want to show the finished product to them until it's done and perfect and mixed and balanced and everything and beautiful. You need to know and fine tune ahead of time. Like, don't wait till the last minute to give them that product. Make sure that you can take like an agile software approach and just show it as it is and get feedback as early and as often as possible. I think that's going to benefit everyone in the long term.
Yeah. And me personally, from that experience, I really enjoyed and liked that a lot. And anyone else who's doing that too, I'm sure that they see how it can not just benefit themselves from a composer's perspective of creating a quality product, but also, just providing that value to any developer. But me personally, it was a really good process to go through, and it, like, not only that, it also made me feel like I was actually contributing to however I could in this way, even though obviously you were doing a lot of the work in itself, but still, and again, that's where we were talking about before, and the importance of really understanding and seeing how you like gel with these people that you're working with, because this is a clear example of how you can really be working very directly with these people to make sure that you are getting ultimately what you want and something that your audience wants. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit more in terms of, really understanding what people want. So when we're creating this music, it's all about the theme. I mean, not the theme, but partially the theme, but ultimately the feeling. So, and when we're talking about feeling, again, it's really relating to what's going on in your game, how immersive it is, but ultimately it's for the players. So, a question I have for you is, when devs are thinking of ideas for music, how important do you think it is to keep their audience in mind as well?
Yeah, incredibly important. I think that goes without saying, but I think the biggest thing they can do is just try to get information on what sort of music the audience likes, finding similarities or patterns that they can use to benefit their game. So I would say, even just kind of creeping on some of your followers and trying to find, in the people they follow, do they have some artists that they follow? Like, I think everybody is guilty, even if they're not hugely into music, following like, up to 5 of their favorite artists just to like keep the day to day on what they're into. Like I follow Game Chops. I love the stuff they release constantly. And yeah, a lot of my audience is also Game Chops fans, and that works for me. The same goes for a game developer. If you know that a lot of your fans love heavy metal because it's like a demonic seance game, then do that. Maybe if you can't contract Mick Gordon, that's fine. I'm sure there's plenty of other people that love to make kind of harder music. If you have a really nice kind of JRPG theme where it's just really tonal and beautiful, and you just want to go for something that's simple but has a really, you're playing it, you're just happy, but you're also sort of, you have this melancholy feeling of nostalgia that you just can't shake, that's fine. Find those artists, find what similarities they all have across the board. They could be different, but try to find the elements in it, that contrast that you want to bring to your video game that you think would suit your audience because they enjoy that.
Yeah, and I want to this when I put this question together, this started becoming really top of mind for me as another potential example, kind of like maybe a bit of an extreme in a way, but so for Netflix has those new slasher films. What is it? Fear Street, right? And
they're really good, actually.
Yeah, they are. I enjoyed them. I'm not into slashes all that much. I didn't find them too frightening for me personally, but I thoroughly enjoyed them. But and here's, I think, part of the reason why. What they have done was that like each of these, there's 3 films. It's like a trilogy essentially, and each one, it takes place in a different time period. But what they did was, so here's my example. It's a horror movie, basically. So for a horror movie, you're thinking, okay, there's going to be certain types of music that are resemble horror, like a horror theme. But what they did was they interspliced a lot of different music from that era to really capture that time period. But it also totally, without a doubt, was intentionally, because it pretty much resonated with their intended audience, their intended viewership. So I thought it was done very well on numerous ends. One, thematically, but also like they were just checking off all the boxes. And they did that again, and this took place in a different time period with the next installment of the film. I'm interested to see what the third one is, and I think that just came out because that takes place in 1666. Those are the subheadings, is basically the year and when these events happen. But it was just really interesting to see that, and that's what was like top of mind. Like, and so I'm thinking, okay, you might have a game that is a horror game, but think about your audience in terms of not necessarily saying you have to have like top hits from the 90s in your video game, but like what other things are there that can help bring things together thematically, creating that feeling, but also that could resonate with the audience at the same time, and just finding all those ways to like kind of like hit those chords with your audience, and it could make a lot of awesome things happen. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So another thing I'm curious about is, creating an immersive and engaging experience for players is always top of mind for devs. But what are some musical elements or techniques that can be used to help enhance the music and the overall player experience?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think you obviously spent a fair bit of time on these and thinking what's going to help your audience. Well, I mean, as you should. I would say there's a few things that come to mind, but number one that I think is kind of underrated is ambience. Okay. So ambience is sort of the little underlying tones that you put into, say, a film or a game that really paints the picture of where you are. So I know that a lot of location audio engineers and stuff for film, they actually record the ambience, like just basically before or after the set, make everyone leave and just record the room that they were actually in.
Yeah, room.
So they can put that into feel. Yeah, exactly, to fill the silence. You should do something similar in video games. So if you know that they're going to be in like an abandoned hospital, in the future, try to go to a hospital and just record like the location, or get a sample on free sound or whatever you need to do to get that ambience and put it in there. You can also get creative with ambience. It's sort of one of those things where just like, it's just a room tone, no one's going to notice, but they really do, because it is one of the most immersive things you can do, and it's quite simple. So you can also add things like, lo-fi hip hop is huge now. People put in vinyl crackle and different things like that. Tape hiss,
Yep.
that stuff that really paints that nostalgic feeling everyone's chasing. That's an example of that. Another thing is stereo width. So in stereo imaging, you have basically front, back, and the sides. So literally like a 3D space. You want it to be as wide as possible without it getting phasey. There is a plug-in instrument you can get that you basically chuck on a channel and like send everything out to the sides, right, to make it really wide and feel big. So if you're listening on like a home theater system or in headphones, it basically feels like it's all around you, like it's giving you a big hug in your ears.
Okay.
There's ways to get stereo width without doing that and getting that phasey kind of artificial sound. You can get it by just panning certain things left and right a certain percentage, so that way they fit in the field. So I would say that's really big to have your composer do. So panning stereo width, rumble for big events. So that's basically taking a low frequency. I think it's around 50 or 60 from memory. That's where the rumble happens. If you have a really high amount of that frequency specifically, it's going to have like that. You can almost feel it all around you. It's sub bass, but it's got a specific rumble quality to it that could be very helpful for like explosions. Now, I'm not talking about sound designers. I'm talking in composing. If you put a little bit of extra rumble in your tracks, it's just going to paint that sensation for your players. Don't go too silly though, because you could easily overdo it. But that's kind of up to the composer to have a good mix in the end, which that brings me to my next point, actually. Having a good mix. So we have the song and the sounds that are composed and arranged, and the instrumentation's done, it's all played, the melody's there, everything's there. You need to have a good mix for it to actually sit in the game and it not play with other, like if you have sound effects and you have a lot of like laser guns, those are going to be sort of in the maybe 1 kilohertz up to 10 kilohertz, like more mid to high frequencies. Make sure that in your music you don't have too many frequencies in that area, because that's just gonna fight with them. You need to let those pew pews come through. That's an example. Just making sure that you don't have things popping out or are too harsh on the ears for your listener, because if they like the music, they're going to turn it up quite high, and if it's high and it's just like in their ears and it's harsh and stuff, they're going to notice. They might not know what to listen for, like what frequencies with an untrained ear, but they are going to notice.
Yeah.
Another couple of things are attenuation, which is basically 3D spatial sound. So we talked about stereo width earlier, but attenuation is basically there's a fire in front of me. If I go closer to it, it gets louder. If I go to the left of the fire, my right ear is that's the only place that the sound's coming from. If I go to the right-hand side, my left ear is what I hear the fire. So it kind of puts you in that space. That's important. You can do that in any game engine. And middleware, but attenuation is incredibly important, and it's one of those underrated things that I don't even think most people think about. It's just, it's part of our life. If you're trying to create an immersive experience, that's what you want to do, is mimic real life as best you can. Alongside that, 2 more quick ones. I would say reverb, like actually having the correct reverb type. So, if you're going down a hall, kind of throwing that into the chain and making sure that you have this big lush reverb as you're walking down, and you can hear the footsteps getting kind of echoey and that kind of thing.
Wow, these were awesome, because it's when we think of music and stuff, it's generally that, right? But like the extra level of how things could like just be really provide that immersive experience, like the was it attenuation, or I'm saying it wrong, I think.
Attenuation.
Thank you.
Like attention, basically, but
right.
Attenuation, like putting attention to that object. Yeah.
But like that's like perfect. Like another great one. Like for example, I had a client that I think they were also the composer for the music too, and they were putting and working on some of the elements to it. And one thing I picked it up right away, which was it was reversed. But the effect was really cool, because basically they were like underwater and there was a missile going across the screen, and you could hear it going from the left to the right. And it was just like that, the extra detail to it was like, wow, that I would have like, that's just awesome. Like, and
Yeah,
like as a player, you like you said, they notice these things and everything, and like it's just that much cooler. A great example in terms of film, if you want to really get into audio engineering or the brilliance of it, and you have a good system for it, is Saving Private Ryan. I'm sure there's a lot of other films out there that do this too, but man, the audio engineering in that film was phenomenal. Like when they're in battles and bullets are coming from the front, like left of the screen and going all the way to the opposite corner, and it feels like it's whizzing by you. That's impressive. But again, like, yeah, you're looking at a flat screen essentially in most cases, but to provide that extra elements, as Dakota outlined, it can really just make that much more of an experience for your players.
absolutely. Yeah, when you were talking about going underwater, something that came to mind is you could roll off all the high frequencies, because when you're underwater, you're not going to
Right.
be hearing those.
Yeah, it's
And
all
you can easily add like a watery, chorusy type effect by adding a specific like chorus plugin to it, and just basically sending it to that, or adding it on the track itself. If you're not using adaptive audio, you can basically just make a version of the track that, as soon as they go underwater, that's what is playing.
yeah.
And it's just got like, it's rolled off to maybe like 3 to 5, maybe up to 6 kilohertz, just so you don't notice those high bright frequencies. And then, yeah, just add that watery effect to it, just to kind of give it a little bit of flutter and wow. So
There's so many things.
Yeah, there really is. You can get creative with it. It's not just about music nowadays. It's about the immersion and the feeling. And you would think we're on a show for therapy, Andrew, with how many times we've mentioned feelings.
Right.
So your listeners are going to have to send you a check for their therapy sessions this week as well.
Talking about feelings. Oh man, that's great. But hey, feelings are important. You got to be mindful of and empathetic of people's feelings and stuff, especially when we're talking about your players, because hey, it's a thing. It's important. So,
Completely.
all right. I have another one to kind of wrap up this section here as we get ready for close. So sometimes a dev may have a specific idea of what they want, but it doesn't necessarily align with the project as a whole. So what are some ways, just from your experiences, that you show people to convey how this very specific idea may impact the outcome of a project negatively?
Yeah, so I'll probably preempt this with just saying like it's music, it's art, so it is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no saying that it's necessarily the wrong thing to do. But if you have a better idea, you obviously want to be as respectful as possible to everyone on the team. But maybe just just be as matter of fact with it, I think. Like, put emotions to the side for once. We just keep talking about feelings. Put emotions to the side, and for the greater good of the game, present your case. If you think that you have a penguin pixel game, right? And you're running around and you want it to be a hardcore penguin game. Well, you're not going to play super upbeat dance music that's like, from reminiscent of the 80s and 90s. That's just so ridiculously happy. Like, if you want the penguin to be like, a badass, you probably want to go for something a little bit harder, and vice versa. If you want a game that is very just chilled and relaxed and everything and beautiful, and it's just all about nature and everything, you don't want to have metal music or like hardcore EDM, IDM, drum and bass. Like, you want a lower tempo, you want a major key, you want just nice tonal ambiances, just relaxing, right? Like Animal Crossing theme, that kind of thing. If they're trying to go in an opposite direction, just be matter of fact and say, hey, if you're trying to evoke this feeling, maybe we should consider doing this, because this. Don't get caught up in the emotions. Eventually you're going to hurt someone else's feelings, or vice versa, because they don't agree with you, or vice versa. That, I respectfully say this, that's not your concern, that's not your business, as long as you're doing it in a respectful way. So try to be as kind as possible at all times, of course, and don't make it personal. Don't make it about disagreeing with someone. Make it about, we want the best outcome for the game musically. So this is why I feel this should be the case. And don't get caught up in the ego too. Like, just because you're a musician or the professional of the group, if you want to say that, in this realm, people that aren't musically inclined sometimes have the best ideas for it, because they don't have that limitation on them that they've been doing it for X amount of years.
Right. Yeah.
So be open-minded, be kind, but also don't get caught up in the emotions in this instance. Just be matter-of-factly and fair. So,
yeah, I think those are really good points too. And again, I know going back to the feelings, I think that's the biggest main point to communicate, because the flip side that I see in this scenario potentially is, what if someone is purposely going for contrast between what is being shown within the game or the level or through a cutscene or whatever, and then the music. And when I'm speaking about contrast, like, it could be like the music could be very dark, but everything could be bright and sunny, for example. But again, it comes back to the feeling. What is the feeling that you want to communicate? How does it relate to the theme or the story and what's happening in this very moment? Because then, in that instance, I would say that having a contrasting song at that moment is very appropriate. But we wouldn't know that unless unless there was direction from the feeling itself. Because I was thinking that could be one scenario where that could easily get like distorted in a way if people weren't on track. But again, comes down to the feelings.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool. Well, that was really awesome too, and important to just really understand what people want in this. So as we get ready to close here, though, we covered quite a bit today, and I was thinking, what out of everything we discussed, what like 3 suggestions or tips would you recommend to indie devs based on our talk today?
It's all about the feeling. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Number one, I would say, although they're very accessible and usually of high quality, try to avoid using asset packs where possible, only because customized, integrated, and adaptive music is huge for the game feel. So, we're not going to hit on that whole feeling thing again, but where possible, try to put a portion of your budget towards contracting a composer, sound designer. There's a million out there. There's a million talented ones out there. Try to find the right fit for you. Somebody that's versatile, somebody you get along with, and somebody that does have the technical knowledge that they can apply to make life easier for you. Because if they don't, it's going to probably cost you more in the long run, and you're just not going to get the right result, I don't feel. Number 2, I don't think we really covered this, but it's probably just a tip that came to mind. Try to put the best parts of your audio in your social media assets and your posts on like Twitter, Instagram, whatever you're doing, especially for trailers, right? Because most people that, if you're talking about a marketing funnel, the top of the funnel, when they know about you, you want them to really be wowed so they can move down the funnel and obviously get on a wish list. If you have a trailer that has a really epic cinematic piece, make sure that the music in your game is epic and cinematic, but you've chosen the best kind of part, and best is subjective, but the best suiting part for the trailer, because that is really going to get people excited and interested. So yeah, best parts of your audio and your social media assets and posts, and especially for your trailers. So I think that's quite important. We didn't hit on that, but just a little tidbit I thought would be good. And lastly, I would say, if budget, I think we spoke a little bit about that. If budget is a constraint, don't rule working out with a composer if you do have some funds to put towards that. I do know that there are composers out there that would do pro bono work. Be careful with that. Just make sure that you're not compromising quality for a cheap outcome. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't talented composers that would do work for free. There definitely are. A lot of people are interested in sort of breaking out into the industry, which is fantastic. And I welcome that. But just make sure that it's the right fit, right? And sometimes you have to pay a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the right fit. There's nothing wrong with that, but just try to find it in your budget to have that, because again, customized adaptive audio that's integrated fully is going to have a huge effect on the overall game feel. And not to mention, you can find a savvy composer that can work with you with your budget. It's not about saying that, oh, the asset is this much, it's going to cost you $10,000. That can be ridiculous if you don't have anything to warrant it. What you can do is things like vertical layering, right? You can reuse themes in a track that you just play slightly differently. You can reuse notes and everything to make sure that you have the longest amount of minutes that you can work for a game. So, if let's say, Andrew, I'm doing composing work for your game. Mm-hmm. If you say that you want to purchase 30 minutes of music to be used in game, how do you work within that constraint effectively? 30 minutes of music by like the standards of I think it's $1,000 per minute of music or something like that. Anyway, so if that's $30,000, how can I actually stretch that so I can give you 30 minutes worth of music that you can reuse and loop and everything, that you're actually really only paying for like 3 minutes of music, but it's just strategically laid out and layered differently top to bottom. Like you might have 16 tracks worth of music and instruments and everything, but they're composed and arranged in a way that doesn't get fatiguing on your ear, that you can use to your advantage, and you didn't have to pay an arm and a leg. Just try to find the right fit for you, not only for style and feel, but also for the ability to work with you for your budget, for whatever limitation you're trying to put on it. Because yes, buying any kind of contract work can be expensive by nature, but if you have somebody that's keen and it's the right fit for you, work together to come to the right resolution. That's, I guess, the moral of that tangent.
No, and I mean, these were all great points, but I really love the last one because, it's a similar approach I take with, with the work that I do, is like, what are ways, like, if it's appropriate, what are ways it can be things that can be scaled and get more value out of the work that you're doing and everything else. And that was just such a great example of that. And I think one that most people don't think, they normally think of, oh, I need completely different tracks for like every level. But in a way, technically they are, even though they're reusing the same melody. But we see this all the time in all sorts of mediums too, where you have that single melody theme played throughout, but then you have a sad, somber version, and then you have a happy, upbeat one, and all those same things. And I don't think when we're getting to a point where, okay, we need music for a game, that we think that way, like, hey, we could really repurpose this, put a lot of the energy and effort into this one main track, the theme for the game, if you will, and then play it throughout, and then change it throughout. So I love that tip, because I think that's one that we generally don't think about.
Yeah, and I like the idea of focusing on the most important parts and making sure that really pops, and then compromising on other areas. We can't necessarily have it all, right? Like we try, we all try our best, but try to be strategic with where you put your time, energy, attention, and obviously cost, because that's what's going to go the furthest in the long run. If you have a really strong main theme and that gets repeated at a lot of points, that's fantastic. If you spend all your time and money on a theme that shows up once in the game, that to me is not a great strategic decision.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, Dakota.
What you said it.
I know, but still, you said it better. All right. Well, Dakota, I really appreciate the time that you had with us today on the show. Is super helpful. I think it was really helpful in getting a better sense and understanding of these processes, how to find people, what things to consider, and everything else. But before we go, I'd love for you to share any ways that people can reach out and connect with you. Do you have a website? Anything else you'd like to share with the audience in terms of how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So my website, if you're interested in looking at compositions I've done and the video game development I've done in the past as well, if you wanted to email me or anything like that, it's all on my website. It's dakotasuave.com. So DAKOTASAUVE.com. Always up for a chat. If you're in Australia, catching up for a coffee would be great. We have lower restrictions here, although there was a recent outbreak, but we've been very fortunate down here. Or even, I'm up for Zoom calls, Skype calls, Discord calls. And, if you want to just connect with me and see some of my work that I release every few days, it's at Coda Suave. So KODASUAVE. And that's basically my handle on everything: Twitter, Instagram, Discord. Also, if there's any other musicians or composers or anything like that, we do have a Discord community that we run. It's called Future Audio Collective. If you want a link for that, it's on like my link tree, but you can also DM me and I'd be more than happy to have a chat. And I guess the project I'm really excited about is the video game I'm doing, and I've obviously done the original sound design and composing for. It doesn't have a name yet, but it will. It's nearing completion, and I'm really excited for that one. And there is an album I'm doing that's sort of like East Asian inspired with futuristic tribal sounds. That's just more for fun. So it'll have 14 songs on it, and I'm about halfway through composing it. And I'm just really excited for that. It's kind of got these really strange textures that almost shouldn't mesh well together, but I'm finding a way to kind of fit it in the groove and really, I'm just excited to see how that one turns out. But anyway, it's been awesome catching up with you, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, same here. And thanks for being on the show.